Welcome. This is a webcast produced by Ontolica for Surfray. My name's Josh Noble. I'm one of the search consultants with Surfray, but I dabble in quite a lot of areas there. And one of the big issues we keep seeing coming up, especially in companies that have very large file types, pharmaceutical companies, legal entities with huge PDFs, engineering firms with large DWG files, is that SharePoint is not always really equipped to handle huge file types. There's a few different limitations within SharePoint, and I'll go through those limitations with you, and we'll explore a couple different ways that we can potentially overcome those. Diving right in, we have a pretty packed agenda here, so I'm going to race through some various different things at a high level. So first off, what's the problem with large file types in SharePoint? Why do we care about this in the first place? We'll primarily focus around things like DWG files because that's kind of specific to a lot of engineering firms, but the same concepts that we speak with about DWG files in SharePoint are the same issues you're going to find with big video files, giant PDFs within SharePoint. It's all going to have very similar issues. So we're going to look at how do we work with those files if we do get them into SharePoint. What do we do if we want to offload those outside of SharePoint to save on some performance and some space? How do we work with that information? And then if we do leave it outside of SharePoint, how do we give that to our users? How do we present libraries within SharePoint so SharePoint remains the central hub for all of our content? How do we provide them libraries for interacting with that content, although it may not be located in SharePoint? And then finally, how do we give them cool views, cool different ways of interacting with that information that they're pulling externally? And we'll get into some product talk as we get later into that information. So here is the big issue with these file sizes, these file types within SharePoint. So by default, SharePoint 2010 has a file size limit of 50 megabytes. You can't upload anything larger than 50 megabytes by default. Now your administrator can go in and increase that limit all the way up to 2 gigabytes, but 2 gigabytes is the limit. You're not going anything past that. SharePoint hasn't just, or Microsoft hasn't just implemented this file size limit for no good reason, though. As you start to get larger file sizes, when you upload them, they take time, they take server resources, aside from the obvious storage capacity issues. And so if you increase that file size limit, just like if you were going to search and increase the accuracy index limit on search refiners to index 1 million items, you're going to run into issues on performance. So you do need to take that into account. There's some great resources out there that'll help you kind of spec out what can my environment really handle if my users are uploading these big files. Also, there's a default connection timeout limit. If you have something like a 2 gigabyte file that you're trying to upload, and that your bandwidth is not to the point that you can upload it into SharePoint within 2 minutes, then it's going to fail. There's also ways to overcome some of those default timeouts, but again, you're tying up server resources if you do that. Not necessarily saying that you wouldn't want to bring the files into SharePoint. There's definitely some benefits to doing so. You just need to keep those types of things in mind. Also, a couple other factoids to throw out at you. You can only throw 5,000 items per folder into SharePoint. You can put 30 million documents in a document library, so that's probably not an issue for a lot of companies out there, but I've definitely seen companies try and do it before, especially on those companies that are using the big fast search for SharePoint deployments. And there's database limits for both collaboration and archival purposes. So with that, let's dive out of PowerPoint and we'll hop over into my test environment. And Derek, can you confirm for me one more time that you're able to see my screen? Good thing I asked. All right, let's go to sharing, share the application. There we go. How about now? I built an engineering company just for you. So engineering is really the classic case of where you find just these huge files. You have DWGs that are massive. You have PDFs for instruction manuals that have been exported into some sort of file type that are just massive. And so this ends up being a classic scenario. So I want to work in this environment just to give us a little bit of a context. So if we go over to one of my document libraries that we've built out here, we'll notice that I've uploaded various different files into this document library, and through Ontolica Preview I do have a cool little preview functionality that gives me a first page, a full document preview of different files within this environment. I can print those and manipulate those, look around them. Pretty cool, especially if you're using things like mobile devices. You can pinch and zoom and dig around there. But what you'll notice here is that DWGs have been uploaded into this document library. Now, I was able to do this before I ever installed anything like a DWG iFilter. I did throw one of those on to this test environment. It doesn't add a whole lot of benefit to this particular presentation, simply because you have to really add a lot of metadata to your content before those iFilters come into any sort of use. SharePoint, you can upload DWGs into SharePoint by default. You can upload movie files, upload files that are not necessarily supported out of the box. There's just a couple tricks on how to do that. So I have uploaded these files into SharePoint. The nice thing about doing that is I'm able to tag those files with metadata. So if we look at our properties here, we've gone through and added various different metadata to these documents. And that metadata is then going to allow me to build things like search refiners off of the content, advanced search dropdowns off of the content. So having it in SharePoint probably is usually the preference until we get into size limitations. But things that are small like this, we can definitely get in there, no problem. So let's take a look at, first off, how do I get this file supported in SharePoint if I'd like to. I'm going to hop over into Central Administration, so I hope everybody on here has at least played on Central Administration a little bit. I'll start from the beginning. This is going to be really basic stuff, so don't get too worried if you haven't worked in Central Admin before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Manage Service Applications. And I'm going to go down to Search Service Application. And then I go down to, there we go, File Types over here on the left-hand side. And here I have a list of all the file types that are available in SharePoint. Things like DWG and movie files are not uploaded by default. MP3 is one that I added in as well. These are really easy to add in. You just have to make sure to go and do this. So to add a new file, I would just do New File, and I would just type in something like DWG or MOV or MP3. It's a very, very simple process. You also have the ability to tag in an icon for that document if you happen to have icons available. So if all you want to do is upload your DWGs into a document library and then make them available, you can do it exactly like that. They will also work in search. You're going to be able to find these documents. Now the difference is you're not going to be able to search within the document. You're just going to be able to search the metadata of the document. So if I'm searching and the term I'm looking for happens to be in the title of the document or some piece of metadata that I've tagged to the document, maybe I'm looking for the author or the last modified date, those are default properties that are added to SharePoint, or you can add custom properties, of course, as well, as we saw in the document libraries. If you search for any of those, you're going to find your content. The problem where we come into the point of talking about iFilters is really if you're looking within the content of the document. Maybe the word you're looking for is engineer, but that's nowhere on the metadata of the document. It's only within the content of the document, kind of like within the body of a Word document. You need an iFilter to be able to apply to look within the content of that document. There's not a whole lot of DWG iFilters actually available. They're fairly simple in concept, but the one I would recommend using is just this one at iFilter Shop. It's fairly cheap, and you can deploy that and it will then look within the content of the document. It'll actually pull out some additional properties that you're not able to find by default. I feel like I need a commission from iFilter Shop on this one. So when it's going and looking within the document, now it's going to look for some additional file type or